Blessings. Today I want to talk about cleaning the mirror of relationship. As we're moving along our path of awakening and self-discovery, relationships are our greatest teacher and mirror, right? Because they show us a window into ourselves. And often we all want to be living in a state of harmony. You want deeper relationships. You want more intimacy, more connection with the community. And in my own journey, I saw my own tendencies to isolate myself from others came from childhood wounding and conditioning that made me believe that I wasn't worthy of love. And in this video, I want to share with you ways that you can clean the mirror of relationship so that you can see over time that as you're on this journey of self-discovery, of spiritual growth, of healing, of transformation, that relationship dynamics can shift and that relationships are actually a mirror. So let's dive right into it. So what do I mean by mirror? So there's this idea that's been discussed in psychology and personal development called the mirror principle. And this is the idea as well of as within, so without in the ancient wisdom, that you're living in the reflection of yourself. Now, we're living in a type of waking dream or hologram that, depending on our state of being, our state of consciousness, how we feel about ourselves, how we see about ourselves, how we see ourselves, and our self-concept, and the patterns inside of our body somatically, intuitively that we're working through in any given moment is going to be reflected to us through the mirror. So how does this relate to relationships? Well, everyone is a mirror for us. Everyone is reflecting back to us some quality of ourself. And especially when we're moving through certain patterns, say a pattern around self-worth or feeling like you need to prove your value to the world, or a pattern of not feeling seen, heard, or appreciated by others, for a period of time along the journey, you may in fact attract that reflection playing itself out. So now how do you shift that, right? So this is where I bring in the idea of cleaning the mirror. And the idea is that there is a sacred reflection underneath the distortions. There's a gift within the shadow. There's a blessing in disguise inside of that process of transmutation, inside of that process of clearing yourself energetically. And that when I had experienced, for example, growing up, and when I was growing up with my family, there was a split in my family in which I grew up with my mom's side of the family. And I, was always felt like an outcast, right? I didn't feel understood or really seen by people. And what this did was I was also very open to the emotional conditioning of my family. So this was the start of a seed of people pleasing, of feeling that I needed to adjust myself to the external conditions and emotional currents of my reality in order to survive, right? And many people who identify as empaths have this. And what I realized was that this was the conditioning that caused me to really close myself down, and to really isolate myself in a certain sense. And as I was, growing up, coming of age, started going through my spiritual awakening, I started to really look at this pattern and how it was manifesting, not really allowing others the opportunity to get close enough to see me. And at first, there were some of these patterns, like when I first came out, I was starting to talk about energy and frequency, that others were rejecting, that reflection, because it wasn't of their worldview. And I had this point in my journey that was like a call to adventure, to go travel, and I was, go travel and live on the land and backpack and all this stuff. And I was at this choice point of like, am I going to conform myself to the conditioning of a world that is telling me that I need to be this ego structure in order to be successful, in order to be liked by others? And everybody has their own version of this, of like, go to school, get a good job, be nice, do this thing, and you will be happy. But I had followed these prescribed societal constructs, and I was severely unhappy. And so I decided to take a leap of faith to be my authentic self and discover what that was and discover what my purpose in life was. And at that point, I had this old high school friend group that liked to still get together, afterwards, after high school and stuff like that. And I was realizing that there was like, I really didn't fit into it, and I was like not going to compromise my values. And it came to this point of like choosing myself, choosing that I was going to live in my own truth and to let go of these, relational mirrors that no longer served me, that weren't really supporting me in the way that I wanted to be supported. And this also meant, in a certain way, kind of unplugging myself from the tribal grid of that reality and like uprooting myself and wanting to find my tribe in a new way, right? Not rejecting or judging anyone that is, a part of, that tribal connection of upbringing, but also understand that family of origin or family of upbringing conditioning does certainly play out in the need to individuate yourself from those patterns and conditionings. So I realized that there was a blessing in disguise here, because once I started letting go of needing the approval of other people, once I stopped depending my happiness on the external, and I let go of that, and I went on a journey of discovery, and I did some traveling, is that I started to meet people that I resonated with on a deeper level, people that saw me on a deeper level, and people that understood me so that they could support me, support what I'm about, what I'm creating. So there's also this point in the journey of like recognizing that there is a part of you that needs to cleave off from needing to, from the societal conditioning, and it can be scary to let go of these old patterns. And yet there's this blessing in disguise that your vibe attracts your tribe. So as I was doing this inner work, and especially working through, patterns I had in my life, especially around like feeling worthy, and feeling worthy not just in the eyes of others, but feeling worthy by the fact that I exist, that my existence, my life has value. And I started to love myself more deeply. I started to have these relationships that I call sacred mirrors come into my life. And these were relationships that started to reflect me on a much deeper level, and I started to feel like more like soul connection, right? More soul tribe vibrations. And like I could actually just be myself. Now, becoming aware of the patterns that arise, because as you're going through this process, patterns are still going to come up. You bring yourself to every situation. You bring yourself to every relationship, whether it be a love relationship, an alliance, a friendship, your family, your community, or the world at large. You bring you. So the single most powerful shift that I've experienced, that I still am practicing to this day, is choosing myself. See, the world tries to condition us to tell us that if you choose yourself, it's selfish. But it's actually how you fill your cup is so that you can overflow and naturally inspire and uplift others. So if your cup is empty, if your cup is cracked, meaning you're not feeling the wholeness of who you are, what have you got left to give? It can only go so far, self-sacrificing, striving, struggling for these status objects and idealisms of perfection in the eyes of, a very materialistic conformity based, societal world mind, and it really does not lead to happiness, because what I realized is that my happiness is found within myself. And even as I started to clarify and go through, deeper relationships, cultivate those deeper connections, is that I became aware of my triggers of like when I didn't feel received, or like when I didn't feel like seen. Instead of projecting that onto the other person, feeling the energy of where it's coming up into the body. And if somebody's doing something obviously that is like blatantly like a pattern of harm, that's a matter of boundaries. But these patterns are going to come up, especially as you start to have relationships. Like I have, a friend, I have a girlfriend that I've been connecting with recently more closely. This friend has, been a big part of my journey, and like there's a brotherhood there. There's also a love there. There's a feminine reflection going on in my love relationship, and it's like that dynamic has been bringing up patterns of the past for me, around love, around really feeling safe to open my heart, around brotherhood, around where I felt, betrayed by, distorted masculine energy in the past, and like how I'm redeeming those qualities inside of myself and choosing to, have the courage to be more authentic in my close relationships and be more vulnerable and to work through the patterns that are coming up. And what I've been realizing as I'm going through that process is that as the energies are coming up, I'm aware of where they're coming up in my body, and I'm aware of the stories that are associated with, that pattern of, am I, is this really real? Am I really loved? Am I really like, is it safe? Like all these different feeling states are coming up. And what happens is that as I own that, as I allow myself to feel that fully, there's an integrating of that shadow dynamic where I'm bringing my awareness and I'm bringing my love into the moment, and I'm allowing myself to alchemize that. And alchemizing that or transmuting that is what cleaning the mirror does, right? And then this other awakened pattern comes into the view. It comes into the mirror of relationship, and it puts you into this other state where you realize that you are living in the reflection of when you see yourself, you will attract to being seen by others. When those patterns are coming up, are you really not being seen by these connections that can meet you on this deeper level, or is it just a pattern that's coming up? Now here's another example of that. Maybe that pattern's coming up, but that person really isn't someone that can meet you on a deeper level. And this is where clarity and discernment comes in, of like, who do you want to let into your inner circle, right? And sometimes, exposing different aspects of yourself to people who can't really see you for who you are, really receive you, isn't necessarily a direct reflection of your own level of emotional maturity. It's that they're more of like almost like a test feedback of you to honor yourself, you to honor your own boundaries, and to realize that we don't have to hold on to all of these, relational ways of being that don't serve us. Like there's a point too of like when I started working more on my creative projects, I started working more on my spiritual path, that like I used to be invited by people to certain things, or friends that I started kind of like not resonate as much with in the past, and then instead of like being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that thing, I was more like, no, I'm focused on this. And that comes into like a certain level of sovereignty within ourselves, of realizing that on a certain level we don't owe anyone anything, right? And yes, on another level you have commitments, you have agreements, right? But on a certain level, the thing that is the greatest gift to everyone is to clean your own mirror, right? And this is where forgiveness comes in. Because as the patterns are coming up, like I've been having fear coming up of like, I had fears coming up of like, is it too good to be true? Like I'm having all this support and like connection and like love in my life and like friendship and like more community of feeling more connected coming up, and like this fear to like really like, open up to it. And it's like, if I don't face that fear, is it necessarily true? That's where that inner dialogue, inner inquiry comes in so well, because it's like, no, it's not necessarily true that I won't be received. But if I allow myself, if I don't work through that pattern, right, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna close myself down, I'm gonna pull myself back, and I'm gonna isolate myself. And that will be removing myself from the opportunity to experience the mirrors of others, to experience the depths of what's there. And what I've been finding is that as I work through these things, I actually am connecting with and surrounded by people that are seeing me for who I am and receiving what I have to share. And like, there's opportunities are kind of flowing and opening, and like, I'm feeling more in like a love vibration. But those things didn't happen until I worked through a certain level of loving myself and being willing to open myself up to really connect with others. Because there's also a beauty to the hermit mode, or the hermit phase of awakening. When you pull your energy, all return yourself, all aspects, parts of yourself across all time, spaces, and dimensions, back within to the wholeness of your own self, and that crucible of moving through the darkness and feeling the aloneness as it turns to the all-oneness with your source, the all-oneness with creator consciousness, the all-oneness with your universe, and the universe and yourself as an extension of that source. And to feel that, I appreciated those periods of time of cultivating a type of solitude and working through these patterns and allowing myself space before I kind of like re-entered getting into all these mirrors. Because there's also, it can be, that's kind of like a bigger, stage, but then there's also like just taking space within the day, or like meditating and doing the things that are really loving yourself, that are really recharging you and really filling your cup, getting out into nature and like writing or doing something creative, like cultivating your own connection to source and loving yourself. And then realizing that as these patterns are coming up, it's a mirror. So as we trace it back to the source of the energy or the feeling state within ourselves, we can start to do that work of transmutation. And what's that going to do? That's going to shift the relational field. That's going to clear your side of the pattern or distortion so that you can get a clean mirror reflection. And we're all on an evolutionary spiral, right? And it's like, if our spirals are continually aligned and we're doing the work with other people, they're also like, you're clearing and cleaning, it's like you can come back to that sacred relationship. You can come back to that clean energy exchange. And then if you continue to evolve and you're taking responsibility and forgiving and clearing on your end and someone else is not, what's likely to happen is that you're going to spiral out of that dynamic, right? There's going to be a demagnetization because you're going to move into a different vibration. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not personal, it's vibrational. We have to also allow ourselves to evolve. And so that's why I felt throughout that journey, it's like, I saw how, the outcast in a way was a shadow. And then in another sense, it was a way of unplugging myself from the conditioning of other people who projected their emotions, did not regulate themselves or really care for themselves. So that, of course, they would bring that to the relationship with me. But after a certain point, when you love yourself enough, you simply will no longer put up with that. You will no longer, you will realize that by sacrificing yourself, you're actually not doing them a service either. And that by loving yourself and owning that and choosing yourself, you're actually putting yourself into a frequency that you can be of a higher level of service. at a higher level of magnitude, and to be an inspiration, instead of a sacrifice. And, the root of the word sacrifice actually means to make a sacred offering. And so I feel that the real sacrifice is of our limited self, ego perception into our higher self or source or God consciousness, whatever you want to call that. And that we come into alignment with a higher purpose in our life. And that as we're in that energy, it's magnetic to others, and it's also very helpful and beneficial to the field for us to be living in that. And, just to wrap this up, is that as I unplugged from that, I also had to face the shadow of how I outcasted myself. And as I loved even that part of me, right, because it's all about loving every part of you, it, allowed me to start opening myself up to connect again, start opening myself up first to the love that I am, and then to give and receive love, because I think that that's just a natural thing that we like to do as humans. And that, I don't have to live an isolated life to live a pure spiritual life. And that, in fact, relationships are one of the most powerful spiritual practices that there is. And as Ram Dass said, as these things are coming up, it's grist for the mill. It's grist for the mill, as meaning it's ingredients for the final product, right? It's the transformational agitation of our own inner flame, bringing us into a greater state of connection and a greater state of harmony. And so it's like, as these things arise, become aware of the energy, become the witness, become mindful. You don't have to be defined by it or whipped around by it, but you can. It's also okay too. But becoming aware of these currents of the emotional spectrum, that there's a high wave, there's a low wave, you get so high, it feels all super awakened, and then it's like super low, everything feels really hard, and then there's this equilibrium. And then there's the witnessing of the whole wave, right? Then you're not trying to be high all the time, and you're not judging yourself when you're at the low wave. And then what happens is that your vibration actually naturally starts to rise to the baseline equilibrium is at a quote unquote higher place. But it's not this crazy cracked out bliss enlightenment high. It's just like a love. It is bliss, but it's like a joy. It's like a love. It's like a equanimous bliss. It's like a balanced bliss. It's like you're riding at bliss, and then you still go through the highs and the lows, but you're not so much addicted to the roller coaster of that. Because what if the enlightenment or the alignment was actually the middle way, was actually the equilibrium of those things in between? And that as we harmonize ourselves, as we regulate ourselves, as we love ourselves, that we start to encounter relationships that really are satisfying. And that we let go of the ones that aren't so satisfying. Or we tend to them in the ways that are still loving to ourselves. And that in that, there's a deep mystical mirror. There's a deep transformational quality to the soul connections and relationships. The mirrors that we encounter and that we cultivate, that we're able to support each other, that we're able to, be the clean mirrors for that awakening, for sharing in the experience, for co-creating, and it's meant to be joyful. So if you haven't already seen that, or you are seeing that, or you feel the possibility of that, or maybe you already know what it is that it's there for you. and that you deserve it just for simply being who you are. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys liked this video, please hit the thumbs up to help send it out and into the universe. And also, I invite you to leave a comment for what resonated, or if you have any more ideas for videos, as well as hit that subscribe button, tap the bell notification icon if you would like to get notified straight to your phone every time new videos come out. And once again, we are here to help you stay tuned into alignment. Thanks for tuning in. Peace and many blessings.